You're listening to Opera Box Score.
Let's get ready to rumble!
Wherever you are, however you're listening, it's America's talk radio show about opera. It's Opera Box Score. I'm Ashley Hardgrave, joined this week by Oliver Camacho. All right, this week we go Inside the Huddle with Dane Lam. Just in time for AAPI Heritage Month, this Australian-Chinese-Singaporean conductor shares his perspective on the state of opera in the Asia Pacific, as well as collaborating with the Sir Thomas Allen, stage director of the Marriage of Figaro for Scottish opera. And then the listener mailbag is full of field reports from the Giulio Gari competition finals and the Yale Baroque opera project. Plus, in the 2-minute drill, the Saudis ditch the Met, La Fenice ditches their music director, and Opera Philadelphia says, let 'em eat cake. Make sure you're subscribing to our podcast. On Spotify, you're going to click follow. Apple Podcasts, you're going to hit that plus sign, and you can also stream episodes of OBS every Saturday at 10 a.m. Central at amplisoundsradio.com. You can also email us your hot takes by writing to mailbag at operaboxscore.com, or you can upload a voice memo using the You Got Something to Say tab on our website, which is operaboxscore.com. However you contribute, you'll get an OBS beer coaster, an OBS lapel pin, and a #1 OBS fan foam finger just for sharing your own hot takes. There's only 2 of us today. Oliver Camacho, how are you?
You know, I feel like it's been a while since we've been together talking about sports, and I think I missed the story of the Bulls. Maybe you already reported on it in an episode I wasn't here, but the Bulls player who lost his job for being homophobic. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes. I was not on the episode the week that it happened because, boy, I had stuff to say. Yeah, it was interesting. It's been met with overall positive vibes. I think there's definitely some, boy with a microphone somewhere in his basement, sports commentator, that probably has some negative reactions to it. But on the whole, it's like you're a representative of an organization, and that organization has a pride night. So you can't go around talking ish on people like that. But in another sports arena, there's something that you seem to be a little verklempt about. What's that?
I just wanted to say that story sort of is swirling around with this post-heated rivalry moment we're in right now. And Jordan Lucas, the volleyball player, it's like, read the room, buddy. It's like,
yeah.
Anyway,
get it together.
I suspected last week that Carlos Alcaraz was going to drop the entire clay court season because of his wrist injury. And earlier this week, it was announced that he is, in fact, not participating in any clay court season events. We're hoping he'll be back in time for Wimbledon. This means great things for my sleep schedule, but I am very sad about it. But he's still young. He got his Australian Open win at the beginning of this year. He's still having a great year, but yes, get well soon.
Indeed. In another negative story that involves clay, the NBA playoffs are happening right now, and that's all fine and good. But in the basketball world, nobody's really talking about any of that, and nobody cares. Everybody is just excited that the Dallas Mavericks are not in the playoffs. And why is that? Because of Klay Thompson, otherwise known as the ex-boyfriend of Megan Thee Stallion. I cannot believe Klay fumbled such a high-quality woman. The entire internet is up in arms after he allegedly cheated on Megan Thee Stallion, emphasis on the "the." So anyway, sorry, Dallas fans, but I think the entire internet is delighted that you're not in the playoffs so that Klay Thompson can go and lick his wounds in private. Hey, let's talk some opera.
Huddle up. Let's go Inside the Huddle.
I noticed that we have been in a series of interviews with cis white guys this past couple of weeks, and I apologize for that. That's not by any way by design, but at any rate, that is what happened. And I thought I'd correct that today by offering a conversation with someone who's only half white. It's conductor Dane Lam, who's working mostly in Australia and the Asia Pacific, and is about to lead a production and a tour of Scottish opera's The Marriage of Figaro, which will be stage directed by Sir Thomas Allen and will star baritone Ian Rucker, who is recently an alumnus of the Ryan Opera Center here in Chicago. So that was enough to make me interested in speaking to him, but just to see if I can get some of that Thomas Allen to rub off on me. But it turns out that we had a lot more to talk about that has to do with identity. And that's a great thing since we are about to enter into Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month, even though Dane Lam is not American. He is married to an American, I will say that. So without further ado, we're going to listen to this conversation. But before we get there, a little bit of Maestro Lam conducting music from Strauss's Der Rosenkavalier with one of his jobs, the Qian Symphony.
The Asia Pacific is a really interesting and I think a very dynamic place now for classical music in general and for opera in particular. Certainly in Australia, where I'm from, there is one main repertory house, which is Opera Australia, resident in the Sydney Opera House, also does seasons in Melbourne. But then there are state companies, Queensland, Victoria, Western Australia.
Pinchgut?
And Pinchgut, of course, who does amazing work with early opera. And then my company, the State Opera of South Australia, where I've been artistic director since 2023. So there's quite a rich tradition of opera making in Australia. In fact, when anybody thinks of Australia as a destination, of course, the most iconic building is the Sydney Opera House. It's a bit of a can of worms because I wish that sometimes our funding bodies would recognise that our country actually is known for something like opera. But Australia has always punched above its weight, above its population in terms of its opera makers, its singers, its conductors, its directors, its designers.
I think Joan Sutherland brings so many points.
Oh, yeah. I mean, wasn't she amazing?
Yeah. And
she did so much.
It's a centenary. When we get to November, I forget when she was born, but it's going to be a Sutherland 100.
Well, it's quite appropriate then that my company, State Opera South Australia, is doing a Norma this year, which is going to be fantastic.
So can you tell, we're talking about Australia, but I am also interested in, other Asian countries. And I have to say that I feel, and like I'm saying this as an Asian person, I see the sort of influx of talent coming from Asian countries, the vocal talent, even like Mongolia, let alone, Korea and China. And it's just, I have a friend who is judging a competition right now, and he sent me, the 40 contestants or whatever, and I would say like more than 50% of them are of Asian descent. So what's happening over there?
I think there's a great love and a great respect for classical music and for singing and for opera. Certainly in China, where I have had quite a significant amount of experience, I believe that that's got a lot to do with this rising middle class. And when we think about, the 19th century in Europe, there was a piano in the salon of every middle class family, and kids learned how to play piano, they learned how to sing. I think we're seeing a similar phenomenon in China, in Korea, in Japan, also places that like Singapore, like Malaysia, where they have strong opera companies. There's a real, I suppose, spirit of collaboration and discovery, because a lot of the time when these operas are performed, for example, I was principal conductor of the Xi'an Symphony Orchestra since 2014, and it's one of the oldest cities in the world. It was the eastern starting point of the Silk Road, the very first capital of China. And we started producing, as a symphony orchestra, professional operas with professional singers, directors, costumes, all of it. It was the first time that professional opera had been staged in this Asian city, in this ancient city, somewhere like the National Center for Performing Arts, the NCPA in Beijing. You know, it's that big egg-like structure. They have quite incredible production budgets and perform work and present work that is absolutely international standard. They fly in international singers, conductors, but also use local singers. So there's this great ecosystem, and it's funny that, you know, it is ostensibly, at least it started off as a European art form, but I often like to say when I'm in Hawaii or Adelaide or China that a great work like Figaro belongs to all of humanity, and I think the proof is in the pudding when we look at the opera that's going on around the Asia Pacific.
I don't want to, I want to continue down this line, but I want to stop tripping over myself because I was recently corrected when categorizing like Eastern Asian countries and South Asian countries, and what is the actual sort of parlance that is used down there to kind of group together what I would think of as Eastern Asian countries.
You know, I mean, to my knowledge, there's nothing really standardized, and certainly my career straddles Hawaii, Adelaide, Xi'an, so Asia, Australia, and you know, the real Pacific. So I call it the Asia Pacific. Okay. Certainly in Australia, one would call it Australasia. And, you know, I'm not actually sure how the Chinese opera companies refer to themselves. I think they see themselves as Chinese companies. I think there is a little bit of healthy competition between companies within East Asia.
When you are working in these countries, what is the lingua franca that's used in rehearsal?
It's almost entirely English.
Okay.
Sometimes Italian. I just did another Figaro in Xi'an, actually, which was a production from the NCPA in Beijing, absolutely opulent and beautiful. And because there were so many Italians in the cast, the lingua franca became, in the end, Italian with a bit of English. Funnily, it's rarely Chinese in the room. I found, certainly when I first arrived in Xi'an in 2014, I learned enough Chinese, even though I grew up with a Chinese father who speaks Cantonese. I learned enough Mandarin to be able to say louder, softer, faster, slower, early, late, sharp, flat, etc., longer, shorter. And it's funny, when you boil it all down, that is almost enough to be able to rehearse. And it certainly circumvents some of these complaints that orchestras have about some conductors that they talk too much. You can't do that when you're rehearsing in Chinese. Well, I can't do that when I'm rehearsing in Chinese anyway.
I want to hear about the productions and what the taste level is for the audience. Like, what are they willing to accept, since it feels like it's still new to them if they are looking for traditional productions, or if they, you know, if you have some reggae happening over there. I mean, we spoke to James Gaffigan not too long ago, and he was telling me the difference between what, you know, the German audiences can tolerate and expect and what a Spanish audience, for example. Where are we on the spectrum?
In my experience, China, Hong Kong, Singapore love very opulent and traditional productions. The kind of productions that a lot of B-tier and below houses in the US, in Australia, in Europe wouldn't really be able to afford that kind of opulence. But the cost of constructing the sets and costumes in China, it generally is lower than it would be in Europe or Australia, which is quite expensive, actually. And so the companies are able to put on these very opulent productions, these traditional productions. They love Verdi. They love Mozart. They love Puccini. So I would say the productions in China, in Singapore, Hong Kong, very, very, very opulent, very, very traditional. In Australia, if you count that in this Asia Pacific region, there is more of an appetite for experimentation. I wouldn't say it's Regie Theater, but it's not always traditional, and sometimes that is a function of budget. But for example, in Adelaide, we just did this new production of the Gounod Romeo Juliet, and that originated in South Australia, went to Perth, and it's going to Irish National Opera next year. And it was a beautiful production by Rodula Gaetano, and Takis designed it. And it was sort of timeless and very contemporary in its visual language and in its aesthetic, but it was received incredibly well in Adelaide, and I'm sure it will be in Perth and then in Ireland.
Due to the NCPA's distribution efforts to get their opera and orchestral productions distributed to the American market, I'm sort of aware of the level of artistry that they hire over there. And I see often a mix of some, name brand artists, American, European, Italian artists working there, mixed in with local artists who I don't know their skill, their level, or their reputation, because I just don't know that market. Do you see that there is actually work opportunity for Westerners to go over there and to maybe become vocal coaches, teachers, performers, help in administration, be, whatever, translators, agents, these types of other opera adjacent jobs?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. And my answer is that some of those roles, I think there is great demand for. Certainly the more artist-facing roles and the more artistic roles, like coaching, like language coaching, like music coaching, like interpretation coaching. All of these particular roles are ripe for practitioners from the West to come in and share their experience, share their knowledge. Certainly, people are very hungry for it in Asia. The Chinese market, the market that I've got the most experience with, it's built on relationships and cultural nuances that I don't, even having spent over a decade there now, I don't fully understand. And that's even with my Chinese background. Language certainly plays a part in it, but also this concept of guanxi, of relationships, plays a big part in it. So you even see the very big agencies, they either only deal with the very, very big houses, but even then they will generally have a local agent on the ground to be able to facilitate the various cultural nuances that are required for working in China. And then it changes, Singapore, Hong Kong are much more outward facing and much more used to Western influence. And so there is more traction for say, coaches and agents, administrators. In my experience in China, most of the administrators are Chinese. Not all. For example, the NCPA is different. And then there are programs like ISING, which is a really interesting program that brings together young, up-and-coming Chinese opera singers, Western opera singers, and they come together for a course. The Chinese singers learn more about European opera, American opera, and the Western singers learn how to sing lyric Chinese, which is something in and of itself. And it's been a really successful program. Haojian Tian, who for many years was based at the Met opposite people like Domingo, he was right there in the golden era. And he's the artistic director of the program. And they've brought these tongue poems now to Lincoln Center with the Philadelphia Orchestra. They've performed all over the world by bringing these Chinese, these lyrical Chinese tone poems with Western and Chinese singers onto some big stages in the West.
I don't want to over-romanticize the work that you are doing, but I feel like I can pull on this thread a tiny bit and talk about how this can be a model for how Westerners and Chinese, especially as we're maybe in political conflict, how there can be collaboration. Can you speak on that?
Yeah, I think it's so important right now. Sometimes the term cultural diplomacy can be so hackneyed and overused to the point where it's rendered meaningless. But I've experienced it. For example, our Magic Flute that we did last year in Hong Kong and then South Australia. So it's a co-production between State Opera South Australia, Opera Hong Kong, and the Beijing Music Festival. So it's going to Beijing this October. Was the first ever co-production in opera between Australian company and Chinese companies. I can't believe that's never happened before, because China is, of course, Australia's biggest trading partner. And diplomatically, the relationship waxes and wanes. But here were these three companies building, investing in this production together, casting it together. I've conducted it. I will have conducted it in all three locations. And I think it's incredible to be able to work with a director like Shuang Zhou, who is Chinese, artistic director of the Beijing Music Festival, and to have these mixed casts, Australians, Chinese, people from Europe, Americans. We all work together, and it might sound a little trite, but I think that is the path forward, this people-to-people contact, this people-to-people collaboration in the face of these big political challenges that we inevitably do face. But it engenders understanding, it engenders common ground, and I think that's the great strength of culture that we have in this region, because in my view, the Asia-Pacific is perhaps the most momentous region in the world now. It's why every superpower wants a bite of the Asia-Pacific. And so to be able to play a part in the artistic conversation and in the operatic conversation, it's a real privilege, but I think we're also doing real tangible good in the world.
Well, as I'm staring at you on our Zoom conference, I have to say that, you are a very handsome guy, first of all, but you're in your salt and pepper stage of your hair, and your hair is kind of wavy, and you have like a defined jaw, and these are not exactly characteristics we think of when we think of somebody who is Eastern Asian. So does that passing some of those white passing features help you, or are they an obstacle? Even when you're working in Australia, you're working in the West, do you notice a difference in how you're treated? This is a very tricky subject to navigate, so feel free to just interrupt me and let me off the hook here. So.
It's ripe and it's fraught. And growing up in Australia in the 90s, I did feel more othered in a way, because it was at a time when certain fractious politicians, some of whom are still around in Australia, I'm ashamed to say, were really big on trashing Asian immigration. Now, these politicians have since shifted their focus to Middle Eastern immigration, to African immigration. But at the time in the 90s, Asian immigration was a hot topic in Australia. And so I felt like I never quite fit in. Growing up, I spent a lot of time in Singapore, because that's where my dad was born and where a lot of my family still is. But Asianness, otherness, was something that I almost felt apologetic for in Australia in that time, and something to apologize for. And then when I went through my training throughout the 2010s in places like the US and the UK, even with some very big conductors, there was just still this perception, particularly as for Chinese people, that you get these technical wizards who are so adept at
disciplined
playing, disciplined, but slightly lacking
robotic.
Robotic, and lacking in this kind of in the emotional depth that you had to somehow be European to inherit. And so I always had this question, as a Chinese Australian, what music do I do well? Okay, Italians do Italian music well, Germans do German music well, Russians do Russian music well. So what do I have to offer? And I had a fantastic teacher when I was in my teens and early 20s. His name was Gianluigi Gelmetti, and Maestro Gelmetti at the time had just started as chief conductor of the Sydney Symphony, but he was also music director of the Rome Opera for years. And he always said that Italians conduct Italian music badly, Russians conduct Russian music badly, Germans conduct German music badly. Now, of course, that's slightly apocryphal, but he was just making a point that it's not really about the nationality. Conversely, talking about perception of race, of ethnicity, when I've been in China working, people don't view me as Chinese at all, because certainly in China, Han Chinese is by far the dominant ethnicity in China. There's very little diversity in China. There are some ethnic minorities, but that's a very, very small proportion of the population. And so either I'm viewed just purely as Western, or occasionally someone like Xi'an, which is northwest, not far from the Xinjiang region. Sometimes they would think I was from Xinjiang, of Uyghur ethnicity, this kind of Central Asian Turkic people. I suppose I could somehow pass for that. In the West, I've always passed as something. People are never sure. Mm-hmm. Some people pick Asian, Chinese. Some people say Greek or Italian. And it's just... So I suppose, to sum up, I've never been quite at home anywhere. I've never been totally unothered anywhere until, I have to say, I came to Hawaii when I started as music director of the Hawaii Symphony Orchestra. Have you been to Hawaii?
No, but I feel like I need to go because I've had such great experiences in like Vancouver and honestly in San Francisco, where there's just so many more mix of Asians and other cultures. And so I just blend right in.
It's great. I mean, the majority ethnic group in Hawaii is mixed race. Everybody's a bit of everything. Chinese, Japanese, Native Hawaiian, Portuguese, the Filipino, the list goes on and on and on. And so my wife, Sophia, and I Sophia gave birth to our son, Frankie, just after I'd started in Hawaii. And he's growing up as a quarter Chinese, quarter Brazilian, quarter Colombian, quarter Anglo-Celtic Australian. And he totally fits in Hawaii. And I think it's a great model for society in a way. It's very harmonious, and it's a good way to make art.
Well, I'm burning through our time here, and I wanted to ask you about this Scottish opera production you're working of, Marriage of Figaro, which is, I think, an opera we can all agree anybody can sing in it. The stories in this opera are so universal. The people are so recognizable. And I think it's one of those shows that can work on many different levels. You're working with Thomas Allen, who is like a personal hero, and I would just love to hear about his concept and how this Figaro is shaping up.
Well, I mean, Tom is just incredible, and the counts and the Figaros that he's sung over, I don't know, almost 50 years it must be, his career. He was just one of the leading acting baritones of our time, wasn't he? And he's still there. He's still performing, and he's still thinking about opera. He's still making opera. So this is actually the third outing of this Figaro production. And at first glance, it might seem fairly traditional. There are corsets and there are peasants, and it's quite opulent. But underneath it all, there's this really subversive, revolutionary bent that the original Beaumarchais and, of course, Mozart put in to his story right as revolution was looming all over Europe. And it's been a real pleasure every day going into rehearsal, sitting next to Tom, and just observing the details that he wants to bring out in the music. Because, I mean, there are so many productions of Figaro, aren't they? And I turned to him the other day and said, because as conductors, sometimes you do kind of think, well, could I direct? And and it became obvious to me, sitting next to Tom and hearing his anecdotes, and also seeing the choices he makes with the staging, with the characterization, with the subtext. He never chooses the obvious. he's lived with this piece for decades and decades, almost half a century, and he manages to keep it fresh. He manages to keep it super recognizable. And so people can come along who love a traditional Figaro and get everything they want from the night. But small choices, just glances or ways of characters interacting with each other, they're not the obvious choices. And I think it illuminates this subversiveness, this countercultural subtext that's running through the whole piece. And you know what else? He's, of course, respects the music. I just cringe sometimes when you get these directors saying things like, oh, I can stage Figaro however I want to do it because the music doesn't give anything. I mean, this is the supreme musical dramatist we have in Mozart, giving us so many clues, or not even clues. Sometimes he's shouting, this is what needs to happen on stage. And I mean, we could go on about this forever, but when directors ignore that, it's so frustrating. I think that's why so many conductors have sometimes fantasized about maybe just directing.
Yeah, like your carry-ons and stuff like that. No, it's true. I think that the instructions are very clearly in the music, but some of those instructions, such as like the Baroque dance forms that are telling us who these people are, people don't know what those dances mean, and so they ignore them, and then you have real like conflict between what's happening in the music and what's happening on stage. And we've had a production, I won't say where, but people know where I'm from, recently that was just really, really disappointing. I also know that Thomas Allen is such an elegant singer, and that, you know, he always seems to deliver a vocal performance. And I wonder if like he's conscious of the importance of giving the singers a chance to deliver a vocal performance.
He is. I think there is so much acting that can be done through singing. Another hackneyed thing that I'm sick of hearing is when directors from other genres, and not all directors from other genres, think that opera singers can't act. I think it's absolutely ridiculous. And of course, there are demands on the ways of staging an opera that are necessitated by it being an acoustic art form. There are very few acoustic art forms large scale anymore, apart from symphony and opera. And a director that doesn't understand the requirements of it being an acoustic art form miss the mark completely in their staging. And it's something that Tom does understand. He understands it, of course, intimately as a singer. And it's a wonderful young cast, and I think they've all benefited from his many decades of experience in bringing these characters to life and finding stillness sometimes so they can deliver. You know, something like, this must be my fourth or fifth production of Figaro, and that Act One trio with Susanna, the Count, and Basilio, when Cherubino's hiding under the chair, hiding under the blanket, hiding under the table. It's so hard. It's absolutely, it's a masterclass in musical dramaturgy. But it's quite hard to get together sometimes because they're always running everywhere. There's so many shenanigans and hijinks. Tom knows exactly when, and there is a lot of hijinks still. It's a very, very funny scene, as you know. But he knows what musical moments the singers just need to collect themselves in, so it's together.
Nice. I love hearing that. Well, we're out of time, but maybe I'll get 30 seconds from you on two things that you have coming up. One, the Renee Fleming environmental concert, the Anthropocene, and two, Hansel and Gretel with friend of the show, Justin Kim as Hansel, and I guess your wife, Sophia Troncosa as Gretel. Can you give us some quick hits on those two upcoming projects?
Yeah, well, I'm interrupting the Scottish Opera Tour, which is actually 15 performances. I'm heading back to Hawaii for 1 week, but it's for a very good reason, because I get to collaborate with the amazing Renee Fleming on her Anthropocene concert that she's bringing to Hawaii. Never worked with her before, but of course, like so many of us, I've admired her since I was a very, very young musician. It's a real coup for Hawaii. And then this Hansel and Gretel that we're presenting in Adelaide. It's at my company, State Opera South Australia. It's our 50th anniversary season, and we have 4 completely new productions. Might I add, that is the most new productions of any company in Australia and New Zealand this year.
Nice.
It's when I went to casting it, of course, Sophia is an amazing soprano, a great character actress, and so she would be the perfect Gretel. And she also knows Justin from days in Chicago, days in London, and I've admired Justin for a long time. This will be his Australian debut, so he's going to come along and do Hansel. We've got a fantastic cast. This is, opera can be one of the most wasteful art forms in terms of binning sets or not using sets and costumes to their potential. And so the brief that I gave the director, Con Costi, and the designer, Jonathan Oxlade, on this was that we're going to not double bill it, but we're going to run it in repertory with Into the Woods. And so they had to create a set that had the same basic foundation that could be dressed in different ways, lit in different ways, costumed in different ways, different puppets, but the same DNA of the basic set. And so it's going to be running on alternate nights, Hansel and Gretel on one night, Into the Woods on another. And I think I'm very proud of the way that our company, which is not a massive budget for an opera company, it's a good mid-sized company, is able to make it work. And it's working so well, in fact, that it's going to be taken on as a co-production with Opera Hong Kong. So more of that Asia-Pacific collaboration going on.
Reduce, reuse, recycle.
Yeah, exactly.
Dane Lam, thank you so much for being our guest.
Thank you so much, Oliver.
Just a little bit of our friend Justin Kim singing The Witch in Hansel and Gretel. Once again, Justin will star as Hansel with soprano Sofia Troncosa, conducted by our new friend of the show, Dane Lam, coming up soon. It made me think this conversation about that Dane and I were having about Americans working in the Asian market for, maybe coaching or as performers or as directors, music staff, this type of thing, since the market is expanding over there. And wouldn't you know it, we have a friend of the show that if you go back in the archives, you could hear our friend Juliet Petrus, who is an American singer who used to be based in Chicago and is now doing a lot of I think China. She works a lot in China, doesn't she?
She does. She works with an organization called Icing Beijing, among some other organizations. But yeah, her Chinese diction, her Mandarin diction, is incredible.
We need to get her back on the show to tell us what it's like now to be working over there. But we've got other things to take care of right now.
Yeah, you got something to say? Then yeah, all right, you can say something. This is listener Mailbag.
This week, we have, count 'em, 2 field reports from our loyal fans, one of which is our dear, dear friend of the show and friend of Oliver and I, Gary. Oliver, when's the last time you connected with Gary?
It seems like Gary and I are now new BFFs. Every time there's a Baroque opera happening in Chicago, he makes it a point to let me know that he's coming so that we can get together. And that actually happens quite a bit these days with Haymarket Opera doing multiple productions a year. So I'm sure I will see him in June for their Charpentier, David et Jonathan. And Gary and I are for sure going to be meeting up in Santa Fe for Rodolinda.
Absolutely. Yeah, I got the chance to hang out with Gary for a bit when he was in town, I guess the last time, which would have been maybe a month or 2 ago. What is time? I can't recall. But yes, it's always fun when we have the chance to connect with folks that listen to the show out into the wild. Gary, know how much we appreciate you.
Hi, this is Gary O'Connor, but you might know me better as Lohengrin Swan Guy. I'm here at the New Haven train station waiting for my train back to DC because I just went to see the Yale Baroque Opera Project's performance of Cavalli's Legisto. Wanted to give a report. They specialize in doing 17th century Italian, lots of Monteverdi and Cavalli. Great repertoire. They've been doing it, I believe, since 2008. Cavalli's Legisto is about two couples. Couple A and couple B switch partners, then switch back. The gods intervene. Like many 17th century Italian plots, which happens to be one of my favorite kinds of opera. It seems silly on the surface, but it's really a meditation on trying to find ways to explain how arbitrary life and people seem, how someone can love you one moment and then not love you another, how your fortune can be good at one moment and not good at the other. As far as comparing this year to past years that I've gone, I went pre-COVID. I think that definitely the production was much less expensive, much less elaborate than beforehand. They obviously spent a lot of money before. It was very minimalist. There was projections, there were some classical columns set on the stage, but that was about it. I would say, on the other hand, there's better and more consistently strong voices. I was especially impressed by Gwendolyn Delaney as Venus, Claire Zhang, you can see I'm at the train station, as Clory, Alias Bonner as Clemente, and especially Clory Shotwell in the title role as Egisto. Good call, bad call, my version of it. The good call is the costume person who gave glorious headpieces to Apollo and to Venus. Relatively simple, but they really worked. Bad call, in my opinion, if you listen to the poem Oronique, Egisto, there's an allegorical overture that includes Aurora, the morning, and Notte, the night, that I absolutely love that they cut. They explain why in the program, but still, I was disappointed. One thing that was clever in terms of the staging is that whenever you have Cupid, which they had in this one, the problem is, do you use the bow and arrow? If you use just the bow, the audience wonders why there's no arrow, or it looks fake to shoot the arrow. If you use an actual arrow, it creates its own problems. Where does it fall? How does it stick? And they avoided all these problems by making it a feather rather than a bow. I thought that was a clever choice. There was, at the first, I went twice. At the first performance, there was a live theater, ladies and gentlemen, moment when one of the violinists broke a string, but it was handled very discreetly. I was sitting in the front row for the first performance, and you really didn't notice it that much, but it was not the time that you want a violin string to break. But overall, I would say, 17th century Italian repertoire is wonderful, and I encourage you to seek it out. Start with Monteverdi and then move on to Cavalli. Second, I would highly recommend this Yale Baroque Opera Project to others if you have a chance. I know they say in the program that they have funding issues, but I would encourage you to support it and just support opera generally, but also think about giving Baroque opera a chance. Reporting from New Haven Trans Station, track number 1, waiting for my Acela, Gary O'Connor. Thank you.
Oh, Gary. I think he and I would probably have been friends in high school after we figured out that we didn't like each other that way. He's married anyway, so.
Meanwhile, I would have been pining for you both in the corner, just naive as all get out.
No. I mean, actually, I did have. You were too smart, though. Weren't you smart in high school? Didn't you know who was gay?
Yes, not unfortunately, I knew, but no, I was quite smart in high school. That was math I didn't get to do or put together until towards the end of my high school career. But looking back, yes, there were signs.
Okay. Well, speaking of friends, here is another reliable friend of the show.
Hello, Opera Box Score. It's PJ. It's Donald. We're here post the Giulio Gari Foundation final competition. We have 9 winners. We have some prize winners and some grants. We'll be brief, but we do want to celebrate this wonderful competition season. It was really terrific. It ran for 4 days. The finals was on a Friday where all the finalists competed. There were, I think, 16, Donald, finalists?
16.
And then we ended up giving 9 prizes. And in fact, in a couple of weeks, those will all perform in New York at the Players Club at a fancy thing on a Saturday night. But enough of that. Let's just go through the highlights, Donald, really quickly. Oliver, you kind of gave me some forewarning about a few of these singers from the Lafont competition that you attended a few weeks ago. So I had a little heads up as to who was going to be pretty good, and I was looking out for them as we were going. But I want to turn this over to our friend Donald Levine, who has been involved with the Giulio Gari competition for many, many years, from almost the beginning, and he's got some thoughts on some of these, the top 5 prize winners.
Well, first of all, I've known all of them. I heard their voices also before.
Okay. You and Oliver knew it, and I didn't.
Yeah, I'm the one that picked the singers
All right,
in the
fine.
Competition, so I knew all their voices. Our first singer was a Korean bass, Sunjin Kim. He was our first prize. Second prize was soprano Anna Thompson. Third prize was tenor Ben Reisinger, who is got an up-and-coming career at the Metropolitan Opera now. Fourth prize was mezzo-soprano Anna Kelly. And fifth prize was a Chinese baritone, bass baritone, Nan Wang. He was a new singer to me, but it's a beautiful voice. They were all wonderful. We had exceptional young singers. Our grants are Chinese bass Lin Fan, Luna Park, soprano from South Korea, and Yoon Soo Jang, baritone from South Korea also. The Encouragement Award was given to Ruja Dong, who's a very young mezzo-soprano from China. I think she's 24 years old. She's a baby. Ruja's going to have a good career. It's a beautiful voice.
Yeah.
They all had beautiful voices. I really was very happy this year.
3 Chinese singers, 3 South Korean singers, and 3 Americans.
Yes. All I can say to that is thank God for Asia. South Korea especially, but also from China, is absolutely amazing. The South Koreans are the new Italians. There's something in their language. Their vowels are very similar to Italian vowels. It helps their singing.
We are here with the founder of the Giulio Gari Foundation, Gloria Gari. She is here with us.
Well, I think we got the cream of the crop of new singers, new opera singers, a new world for everyone. And I have wonderful people that are with me who understand and are so important in the lives of the young singers. And I do appreciate all the help from everyone, and I want everyone to enjoy themselves with this and have a wonderful year.
Yeah, and I think they will, thanks to you. Gloria started this with very famous, important people, a gentleman named Stephen DeMeo, and also Licia Albanese. And this was all back in, what, was it 2000?
2001.
2001. There was a big concert at Merkin Hall, and kind of the rest is history. And almost $1 million has been handed to young singers at this point from the Giulio Gari Foundation. We hope it'll last forever. But that's our report. Thank you so much for the time and energy and your attention from the Giulio Gari Foundation. It's Donald, PJ, and Gloria signing off.
Also, if you want to, we always need contributions. We have to keep this going. We have to be able to provide these grants for the young singers.
The pitch.
So it's go on our website, giuliogari.org, and there's a little place on there where you can make donations.
Shameless self-promotion, Donald.
I am shameless.
Shameless.
Or, better yet, make a very large contribution to Opera Box Score and tell us how much of it you would like us to allocate to the Giulio Gari Foundation. Meanwhile, you can help us spread the word about Opera Box Score and help us solicit donations by giving us a rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And if you have a few extra moments, why not write a review? Glowing responses only. Coming up next, it is the 2-Minute Drill.
This just in, the 2-minute drill.
All right, listen up. Here's everything you need to know about what happened in Operaland this week.
The Metropolitan Opera's $200 million deal with the Saudi government is kaput, following weeks of rumors and ongoing financial turmoil. Saudi officials cited economic concerns tied to the Iran war and the Strait of Hormuz blockade. They are only doing the projects that are essential, said Peter Gelb. This is something we have been working on for several years. It's a very significant disappointment.
After months of dispute, Teatro La Fenice has cut ties with Beatrice Venezzi, who was appointed music director designate last September. Venezzi's affiliation with the country's right-wing government, along with perceived lack of conducting experience, prompted protests from musicians, audience members, and several major donors and board members. The situation escalated following a recent review in which Venezzi accused the orchestra of nepotism. Quote, "These posts are practically passed from fathers to sons," Venezzi says. "I'm not from a family of musicians. I am a woman, 36 years old, the first female director of La Fenice." The dismissal was announced after a performance of Lohengrin and was met with applause from the audience.
Opera Philadelphia has announced their 2026-27 season, the second curated by General Director and friend of the show Anthony Roth Costanzo. The season features 5 productions, the best of Mozart's Juvenilia, Mitridate, starring friend of the show Lawrence Brownlee, friend of the show Anthony Roth Costanzo, and soprano Lauren Snowford. Courtney Bryan's first opera, Suddenly Last Summer, based on the Tennessee Williams play. Gershwin's Let 'Em Eat Cake, a biting 1933 satire about an American president who refuses to accept a re-election loss and stages both a fascist coup and a White House redesign. Kanisa Shaw's new production of Aida, starring Tiffany Townsend, and the world premiere of Luke Stiles and Alan McKendrick's Sitcom, an opera staged as episodes of a TV comedy series. The wildly successful $11 pick-your-price tickets will continue for a third year.
Korean National Opera has launched an outreach initiative bringing performances to communities with limited access to the arts, starting with visits to juvenile detention centers in Seoul and Anyang this April. These concerts are part of the 2026 National Opera Cultural Sharing Performance, which uses opera to provide emotional support and foster empathy. This program will expand this year to include military units and childcare facilities.
According to several local and Austrian media outlets, Hungarian soprano Andrea Rost, who campaigned for the new Prime Minister Péter Magyar, is the favorite to become Hungary's new Minister of Culture. Having entered politics in 2024, the 63-year-old soprano enjoyed an international career, notably in Salzburg, La Scala, the Metropolitan Opera, and Paris Opera throughout the 1990s.
400 miniature statues of Mozart and an undisclosed number of statuettes of his dog Pimperl will be installed around Salzburg's Mirabell Gardens in celebration of Mozart's 270th birthday. The public art will be created by Ottmar Herr, who designed similar mini Wagners on the grounds of Bayreuth and tiny Beethovens in Bonn.
Leaders of Ravinia Festival, the Joffrey Ballet, Lyric Opera of Chicago, and other prominent Chicago arts groups are backing a proposed Illinois law aimed at curbing the rise in fake tickets. Lyric Opera of Chicago's General Director John Mangum said his team has seen more fake tickets on the marketplace in recent years. This is not a small or isolated issue, he told the Chicago Sun-Times. It is a structural problem that affects audiences, artists, and the broader cultural economy.
In major awards news, American composer John Curigliano has won this year's Nemers Prize in Music Composition, given by the Bienen School of Music at Northwestern University.
Go Cats.
The award comes with $150,000 and 2 on-campus residencies. Meanwhile, 27-year-old Swedish mezzo-soprano Annie Ternström has won the 12th Elizabeth Connell Prize and £15,000. And Music Academy of the West has named friend of the show Sunley Pierce as recipient of its 2026 Alumni Performance Award.
The Italian Music Critics Association's Franco Abbiati Award winners have been announced. Maggio Musicale Fiorentina was awarded Best Opera Production for its presentation of Hens's Der Junge Lord. Alexander Sadi was Best Conductor, and Cecilia Ligorio won Best Director. The Best Male Singer Award went to baritone Luca Salsi, and female singer was Lithuanian soprano Vida Minkevičiūtė.
In trade news, friend of the show Mark Minkowski will take over artistic leadership of Boston Baroque, beginning with the 26-27 season. Founded in 1973 by harpsichordist and conductor Martin Perlman, who led the ensemble until his retirement in 2025, Minkowski will become the ensemble's second ever music director.
On the disabled list, tenor Andreas Schager has withdrawn from 2 performances of The Flying Dutchman at Vienna State Opera. You've been fighting dragons all over the world for years, and then you're gently slowed down by a few tiny pollen, said Schlager, who is canceling on the recommendation of his doctor. Jörg Schneider will replace Schlager in the role of Eric.
Exit stage right. The great American conductor and composer Michael Tilson Thomas has died at age 81 of brain cancer, less than 2 months after the death of his husband, Joshua Robeson. Thomas was born in LA in 1944, quickly making a name for himself as a conductor of new works before the age of 20. In addition to being a leading conductor at a number of major orchestras all over the world, Tilson Thomas founded and directed the Miami-based New World Symphony in 1987 and took the helm at San Francisco Symphony in 1995, leading the organization as music director for 25 years.
And on this day, April 30th, birthdays include French soprano Hortense Schneider, who created the role of Hélène in Offenbach's La Belle Hélène. She was born in 1843. In 1870, Austro-Hungarian composer Franz Lehár was born. In 1871, it was the birth of American soprano Louise Homer in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. That's one for you, Matt. In 1916, we say happy birthday to soprano Alda Nonni, born in Trieste. 1916 saw the birth of American conductor Robert Shaw in Iowa. And in 1934, on April 30th, it was the birth of American baritone William Chapman. First performances include Handel's Tolomeo, premiering in April 30th on 1728. In 1781, it was the first performance of Salieri's Der Rauchfangkehrer in Vienna. Yep. In 1805, it was the first performance of Boieldieu's La Jeune Femme Colère in St. Petersburg. And then in 1857, it was the first performance of Offenbach's Dragonette in Paris. 1902 saw the first performance of Pelléas et Mélisande in Paris. That's an opera by Debussy, if you didn't know. In 1917, it was Mascagni's Lodoletta that premiered in Rome. In 1934, Stravinsky's Persephone premiered at the Paris Opera. In 1949, Franco Alfano's last opera, Il Dottor Antonio, premiered in Rome. And on this day, April 30th, it was the first performance of John Harbison's Full Moon and March in Cambridge, Massachusetts in 1979.
And that's your 2-minute drill.
Just a little bit of friend of the show, Rachel Willis Sorensen, singing the Vilja Lied live from Vienna with the PKF Prague Philharmonia, conducted by Jochen Reider. It's hard to excerpt Pelléas et Mélisande in 30 seconds, so we thought we would give you a little bit of Lehár for the birthday boy.
Well, and Vilja is, as the kids say, a bop. So
Yes.
I don't think anybody ever tires of hearing about that. Hey, Philly seems to be doing some cool stuff with its opera.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say this season feels a lot more audience friendly. God, I'm going to sound like a jerk. Hopefully Anthony's not listening just yet.
We love you.
Than the previous season. But The Sleepers Awake got great reviews, which stars Suzanne Burgess. That's an opera by friend of the show, Gregory Spears. So 2 friends of the show on that production. I did not make it out to see that, but I heard great things about it. This year, I am always so excited to see Mitridate. I've never seen it live, but I love this opera so much. It's so hard to sing. It's just nonstop aria fest. And it's going to be, I believe, Larry Brownlee's first time at it. That's going to be very exciting. And we love Lauren Snowfer, and of course, we love Anthony. This Gershwin opera, operetta.
I'm so excited.
Yes. I cannot wait to hear more about that. An Aida, that's definitely one for the audiences with a black stage director, a renowned black stage director. And then the sitcom opera, and then the Courtney Bryan joint. We are going to get Anthony Roth Costanzo back on the show. I know he's already been on twice, but we can always talk to him, especially since his autobiography is going to come out just in advance of the Opera Philadelphia season, or around the same time as the Opera Philadelphia new season. So I'm sure all of that is timed together, but we'll try to get him on after we get an advance copy of his book, Countertenor.
I mean, he is reaching Alexander Neef's levels of busy. It's all just happening in the same city. So good on you, ARC, for keeping it all in your backyard. Hey, at least they're able to afford stuff. Not sure the Mets going to be able to do that for much longer, given that the Saudis have pulled out of their deal for the Met. Woof. The Strait of Hormuz is kind of ruining lots of things. And so I like to say, Trump is personally coming after everything I love. He has been messing with the arts left, right, and center. He's ruined the Kennedy Center. And now with his chosen war, he's made it impossible for the Met to go into fiscal solvency in the way that they thought it was. I'm sure that's not the whole reason, but I'm absolutely taking it that personally.
Yeah, there's this think piece that Ed Midget, friend of the show, has been sharing. It is by Doug McLennan, and it's published in, I guess maybe it's a Substack or like a, what do you call that? It's like a blog or something like that, but it's called AJ Chronicles.
Yeah, Substack's like the new blog spot.
It's an essay for a platform called Diacritical. Anyway, the pull quote is, the lesson is that the structure supporting cultural production are really broken, so much so that America's largest performing arts institution isn't immune. And number two, the Kennedy Center isn't in very good shape either these days. And there's a ultimate suggestion that maybe, Peter Gelb is a problem. So much to unpack. We'll link Doug McLennan's think piece on this so you can read it for yourself. It's very good, but it's sort of, I don't want to kick, somebody while they're down. This is really rough for the Met. And we, a lot of people that work there. We care about the institution. We want to see it thrive. And don't put your faith in that government over there. They've already proven to be despicable. So what made you think they were going to come through for us?
Yeah, I mean, oil money, be it Texas or Middle East, is going to come with strings, and those strings can snap at any moment. Hey, but you know what's doing a little bit better? Chicago artistic institutions going and lobbying lawmakers and supporting these new laws. I read this news article, and I have to say, they're talking about how these fake tickets and scams are becoming a problem. And it made me feel so fortunate because I go to a lot of artistic performances in this city and state. I have yet to come across fake tickets here. Have you gotten any sort of like scams as of late?
Well, I mean, maybe I'm on social media. I'm on old people social media, Facebook, more than you are. And I often see these ads that are clearly a third-party vendor for, See Madam Butterfly, and it's a picture of a completely different production, like an outdoor production, like Arena de Verona or something like that, That's like, who is an idiot that, sees Madam Butterfly and remembers that's an opera and says, oh, that's where I buy my tickets, So it's I put the blame on naive audiences, but, here we are trying to be more accessible, and who's to say that, there is a third-party vendor that is selling butterfly tickets because they're so popular, that would be a good problem to actually have. But we don't have that problem. Nothing is ever sold out. Always go to the presenter and look there first before you try to buy tickets anywhere else.
Absolutely. And if for some reason you cannot find that vendor, the only other place that I would even remotely suggest would be StubHub, because they're going to be backed up with insurance. But luckily in the state of Illinois, we're really good at making laws that protect consumers. I want to just touch on this real quick. I'm all about women supporting women. I'm all about women going through first, except for this Beatrice woman, which I'm actually a little bit frustrated about, because I always want to be supportive of that. I also want to be supportive of people that are against nepotism and good old boy clubs. I really want to support that. But then I saw that she was tied to the right-wing government in Italy, and I was like, I'm willing to let this one go in the same way that I'm willing to giggle at the misfortunes of certain women, the likes of which include Kristi Noem and Caroline Levitt and Shmara Kishmark. Anyway, let's wrap the show up.
Good call. Bad call on Opera Box Score.
Good call, bad call. It's how we always end the show. Oliver, what are your calls?
I went to Lyric Opera Rising Stars last weekend. They presented Donizetti's Viva la Mama and then an aria spiel, which they normally do, but within the context of the Donizetti comedy. And I have to say, Christopher Humbert Jr., who is finished, this was his final performance with the Ryan Opera Center. Man, that was a tour de force performance, singing Viva la Mama, playing the lead role in Viva la Mama. And you have to have seen this to believe it. But yeah, Viva la Mama is a drag opera, I think. I think that's what it's supposed to be. And Christopher Humbert...
We could say that, yeah.
Yeah. And it was very, very good. His performance as La Mama. I don't know what else to say. It was outstanding. One of the best things I've seen from the Ryan Opera Center, and I've seen a lot of really great things come out of there. Also, kudos to Adia Evans, who sang Pace Pace Mio Dio and really served in every way possible. And Emily Richter, who had the soprano role in Viva la Mama. It was sort of a two-hander, the Viva la Mama cast. But it was done very, very well, and I was extremely impressed. My other good call goes to pianist Jonathan Biss, who wrote an article, published an article saying why he quit his post as a faculty member at the Glenn Gould School of the Royal Conservatory of Music in Toronto, just 7 months after being hired there. Due to their mishandling of abuse allegations. He does not want to be affiliated with an institution that does not deal with these things in the proper way. And we don't see that a lot. People saying, no, I'm quitting because I don't want to be associated with this. I think that's very courageous. And I applaud him. We will link to his article in the show notes.
Absolutely. My good call this week is a little bit of an invitation, if you will, to something that I'm really excited about. As you may know, I sing with Chicago Symphony Orchestra and their chorus, and we are about to do a program that includes Poulenc's Gloria, which is one of my absolute favorite. I just love Poulenc, period. It's crunchy in all the right ways that just scratch the correct itches inside my brain. And in the rehearsals, they've been really, really incredible. The program is going to include Ravel's Mother Goose Suite, Poulenc's Gloria, and then the Saint-Saëns Organ Concerto with Patrick Godin, our friend Patrick, on organ. And one other thing to sort of sweeten the deal for you, there are going to be pre-concert conversations with none other than Weston Williams. So if you happen to be in the Chicago area and you want to just have an OBS Palooza Poulenc extravaganza of an evening, you can join us for one of these performances. They run May 14 through 16 at Chicago Symphony Orchestra. That is it for this week's edition of America's Talk Radio show about opera. Make sure you subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. You can also get your voice heard, and you can find links to the stuff we've talked about on our website, which is operaboxscore.com. That's also where you can put your money where our mouths are. You can give back to the OBS using the Support the Team tab. Your announcer is Norm Waddell. Your creative consultant is Oliver Camacho, and your audio editor is concert lecturer extraordinaire Weston Williams. The executive producer of the OBS is George Cedarquist. For our guest Dane Lam, I'm Ashley Hardgrave, asking you to continue the conversation about opera as you are gently slowed down by a few tiny pollen. We're back with an all-new show next week when we go inside the huddle with conductor David Neely. Plus, you get more opera headlines, more hot takes, and more tiny Beethovens in Bonn. Join us.